There's just so many awkward moments in our lives, but there just doesn't seem to be awkward like awkward that involves family. It's just that one part of the recipe that makes a moment completely cringe. And let's get into it with this very long video about all of these different stories. Here we go. While riding in the car with my college girlfriend of 3 years and her family made me get out and walk home because I wasn't family. What's the most awkward moment you've ever had? Story 1. I was living with a friend for a while, and during this time there were many awkward moments, the most of which follows. We were sitting down, smoking herb, and playing video games. We were having a pretty good time. We were laughing and joking and stuff, and the day had gone pretty well so far. Throughout this period, the phone would periodically ring, and my friend would return looking ticked off after each call. The phone rang maybe about 20 or so times over a 2-hour period. Clearly, someone was being a butthole. Another hour goes by with just as many calls, and eventually his mom returns home from work a few hours earlier than she normally would have. A little while later, a car pulled up out front, and someone was laying on the horn. It's the butthole. It was my buddy's father, who was unmatched in douchebaggery and being a peenhead. He gets out of the car, slams the door behind him, hops the fence, avoiding the gate altogether, bolts up the front steps, and proceeds to pound on the door like a jerkwad. Buddy goes to answer the door, and they both enter nonchalantly. They leave the living room and enter the kitchen and have what seemed like a pretty civil discussion. 10 minutes go by, and during this time, I'm shooting stuff in Halo. Buddy re-enters the living room, followed by his father, who has the look of a clinically constipated man. Buddy sits down and picks up his controller and begins to help me shoot stuff. Not even a second later, his father screams, "What the frick are you doing, you fat frick? Why don't you go out for a walk?" My buddy tells him to go be intimate with himself and to leave. Awkwardness sets in. I keep my eyes on the screen, and his dad quietly stands there glaring at us both for at least a couple of minutes. More awkward. "Why don't you get a freaking job, huh?" "I have a job, Dad." "Well, why the frick aren't you working?" "Today's my day off, peenhead." "Curse you! Don't talk to me like that! I'm your freaking father! You should respect me, fat jerk." "Dad, you're a butthole. You treat me, Mom, and sister like filth. You don't talk to me or sister at all. You left Mom because you're an alcoholic substance user, and you're the one without a job. So why don't you leave?" Blah, blah, blah. Dialogue continues, all while me and my buddy are tearing through hordes of enemies. My friend doesn't miss a beat, but eventually he does lose his temper. He begins screaming, and now there's a shouting match going on with me sitting there. Maximum awkward achieved. I had no idea what to do, so I quietly set the controller down and inched my way out of the room. Too long didn't read. Buddy and his father had a screaming match no more than 10 feet away from me. As far as I know, Buddy made Dad his shrew. Man win for him. Were the emotions just that high that they felt they had to have this discussion with this other person in the room? Did they acknowledge him at all? I want to know if they had a conversation afterwards about it. I wonder if the guy just avoided hanging out with this person for a while. Was the dad hoping to shame this guy in front of his friend? Story 2. I was dating a girl in high school once who had a really messed up family. Total rednecks. Her mom had to have weighed more than 300 pounds, was rude, an enormous slob. She always had food stains on her clothes and pretty ignorant. Her dad was pretty much the same, only in better shape. Obviously bitter and constantly in a bad mood. My girlfriend, let's call her Samantha, hinted at the fact that he was emotionally and physically abusive after we broke up. She was pretty hot, by the way, and smart too. GT program, honors classes, a real package, but for the family. Many years after we dated, I know she actually took her parents to court and got emancipated. Physical shaming was involved, so yeah, bad situation. Anyway, we didn't ever hang out at her house. Always my parents' house, school, or someplace around town with her or my friends. I don't know the reason at the time, so one day I decided to surprise her, bought some roses, and came over to her place with the flowers. Her mom answers the door and is all suspicious. When I asked for Samantha, she starts screaming at the top of her lungs for her husband. Samantha's dad came out, looks at me, looks at the flowers, and starts flying off the handle. I'm stuck outside, dumbfounded and bewildered as he storms around the house. I can hear him rummaging around, throwing stuff, shouting, "Where is it?" And then finally I hear a kind of triumphant, "Aha!" Next thing I know, I can hear Samantha's voice saying, "No, Daddy, please," over and over again, and her fat slob of a mom is staring at me with a smug smile. Next thing I can hear is a dog yelping, a screen door being tossed open, and then, bang, a gunshot. Samantha starts crying, and the dog has gone silent. The mom slams the door, and I hear yelling on the inside of the house. I'm still confused until the door opens, and it's the father screaming, "Get the frick off our yard!" So, yeah, I do what he says. I found out later when Samantha broke up with me that her dad had told her if she ever brought a boy to the house, he was going to unalive her dog. And he did. That's why we never hung out at her house. She had never told me because she didn't want me to know how messed up her home life was. Too long didn't read? Girlfriend's dad shot her dog because she was dating someone. Poor everyone around this situation. This guy was just wanting to surprise this girl. Must have felt really guilty for being the cause of the dog's death, although not intentionally. There should have been some communication at this point. I'm pretty sure she started planning her emancipation on day one. I wonder if their breaking up had anything to do with this situation. Story 3. Oh God, I can be an extremely awkward person at times. Here is one of my worst "what the hell was I thinking" moments. I had plans to hang out with my friend Dom. We had been hallway friends for the majority of high school, but only recently had started hanging out. Keep in mind, I'm extremely shy and awkward when I first start getting to know someone, and since we had only recently begun to hang out, I was still in the awkward phase. He had an appointment, at the time I didn't know what for, which is a very important detail, set for after school, so I told him I could just pick him up somewhere in town after he was done. We decide on Safeway, which is a pretty central location. I pull into the Safeway parking lot, and I see him walk up to the car. He's all smiles. I'm not really sure what the occasion is, but it's always nice to see someone happy. I unlock the door and let him in. The first thing he does is flash a huge grin, moves his face in super close and asks, "Notice anything?" Little awkward old me has no idea what he's talking about and frantically searches for anything noticeable. Since he's smiling so big, my eyes are naturally drawn to his teeth, which were in some need of brushing. Never in my entire life will I ever understand why I did this, but I gave out a little half laugh and say, "Nothing a little brushing won't fix." His smile dropped. I just got my braces off. Oh, I done messed up. He looked like he just got beat over the head with a sack of unalive puppies. I saw the words leaving my lips as joy-seeking missiles, and each one scored a direct hit. We drove in silence to his house. Continued to hang out afterwards, but never spoke of that situation again. Again, it comes down to communication. Maybe this person should have asked what the appointment was for. Maybe the dude should have volunteered what he was there for. I could understand if these were the type of braces that were behind the teeth. I might not understand if they were the regular braces that would be seen over the teeth. Story 4. I'm currently dating a Pakistani girl. I was over at her house watching a movie, and I jokingly said that she owed me $20. She did. Normally I wouldn't care, but I needed gas money. This escalated, and we had a little argument and were just silent for a while, which is normal for us when we have an argument. We just shut up and let it pass. So 5 minutes later or so, her parents and aunt come downstairs to watch the movie with us. This is where it starts to get awkward. They notice we aren't speaking to each other, and her father starts speaking to her in Urdu. She sort of just brushes him off in English. "Not now, Dad." He says something again, then her mom says something, then her aunt says something. My girlfriend again basically just says, "Not now," in English. Mind you, it's not uncommon for them to speak Urdu around me. It's their first language, after all. So they keep talking in Urdu, gesturing at me. My girlfriend is becoming more and more visibly upset. I have no idea what is happening at this point. Eventually, she just goes to her room. I'm left sitting there while her mom and aunt watch the movie and chat in Urdu. The aunt's English isn't very good, and her father glances between me and the movie. I excuse myself to go to the bathroom and then go talk to my girlfriend. Her family was asking what happened, but she just wanted a little privacy. I seriously had no idea what was happening. Too long didn't read? My girlfriend's Pakistani family was arguing about me in Urdu while I was sitting next to them. I had no idea what was happening. People say it's rude to speak a foreign language in front of those who don't speak it. While I agree, this has never been an issue before, and hasn't since then. These people have treated me like a son since I started dating their daughter. They're kind people. Story 5. I used to babysit a 3-year-old when I was in high school. It was her birthday and her dad invited me. I bought her a stuffed snake since she was into snakes and some helium balloons and showed up a few minutes early in case the parents needed some free babysitting while they set up. I get there and nobody is there except the mom and the 3-year-old, so I play with her and supervise while the mom ignores I exist, which is cool. She scares me anyways. About an hour goes by. Things are getting a bit awkward. Nobody is showing up. I'm in their house being in the way, but leaving now would be rude, so I wait around. Finally, kids and family show up. The kids are upstairs, all the adults are sitting around the living room, and nobody acknowledges I'm there. I smile and try to say hi, but people just look away. So I stand in a corner by the stairs waiting to be thanked so I can leave. And about another hour goes by, me just standing right there in the corner of the room, about 5 feet away from everyone, awkward as hell. The dad shows up, and he stands right next to me, staring into space, sipping a beer. I try to chat with him, but he just nods and stares off into space, ignored by the rest of the people as well. Finally, I'm thinking, curse this, and I announce I have to go. Everyone just stares for a second, then turns away. So I just walk out of the house. No thank you, no bye, no hello, no offer of food or drink, no offer to sit down. You were unalive the whole time. Only explanation. Story 6. I was out at a bar with a few friends having dinner and drinks while watching the hockey game. Midway through dinner, I have to excuse myself to go use the restroom. I walk into the bathroom, and there are 2 urinals and 2 stalls. One of the stalls was occupied while the other was missing a door. The business I had to conduct needed a stall, so I decided to wait a minute or two for the other one to free up. After about 5 minutes, things start to get urgent. I decide to use the stall without the door. I figured if anyone walked in, they would understand and it wouldn't be that bad. After sitting down for maybe a minute, a man walks into the bathroom. He sort of takes a peek into the stall and then asks, "Hey, there's no door. It looks broken." I assure him that he is correct and the door is in fact non-existent. He then asks me what I was doing in the stall. I gave him a quick explanation of my predicament. He nods and goes about using a urinal. I was relieved, thinking that conversation was over. Wrong. He finishes and sits on the counter facing me and starts having a chat about the hockey game. It's amazing how unnerving it is to make eye contact with someone while taking a dump. I tried to keep my answers short and made it clear I was in no mood to chat. However, he kept insisting on making small talk with me. After a solid 5 to 10 minutes of this going on, he finally leaves. I quickly start to clean up and hope to God that no one else comes in. The guy was gone for 15 seconds before he popped his head back into the bathroom and asks, "Hey, you sitting at the bar?" With my hand cleaning my butt, I said, "No." Too long didn't read, got forced into small talk by someone who was observing me taking a dump. This guy has no concept of social boundaries. Does this guy just go into bathrooms and just lament all the conversations he could have if it weren't for the doors in all the other stalls? While he was growing up, did people just constantly talk to him while he was taking a dump? When I was a kid growing up in elementary school, the bathrooms that they had stalls that didn't have doors. Any kid who tried to use those would get made fun of by other kids. It made me hate using the bathroom at school. Story 7. So my family and I have a trip to Japan. We hear about this amazing sushi restaurant, so of course decide to give it a try. We keep getting the directions mixed up because we're directionally challenged, but finally find our way there around 9 p.m. and get a seat and menus. My dad tries to place our order, but one waitress in particular keeps brushing us off each time we try to order. We sit there for 30 minutes trying to order our food before my dad just blew up. He grabbed a waitress and started screaming at her in English, "We are customers. Treat us like customers," or something like that. Everyone is staring at us by that point, and my mom and I are trying to melt into our seats. The poor girl bursts into tears, and the manager is called. Turns out, my dad grabbed the wrong waitress. We managed to place our orders with a different, trembling waitress, choke down our food, I think it was as good as they said, and then get the heck out of there. When I said the waitress brushed us off, I mean that whenever we tried to flag her down, using broken Japanese, she would say, "1 minute," or "wait a second" in Japanese, and go off and do her thing until we tried to get her attention again 5 minutes later, and repeat for 30 minutes. Also, there weren't any buttons for us to push on the table. We watched other customers place their orders with a waitress like we tried to. And another thing, my family is Asian. American Asian, but I doubt they realize that, so you don't need to worry about us tarnishing the precious American name. If he had grabbed the correct waitress, that wouldn't have been awkward in the slightest. Story 8. I spent the weekend at my girlfriend's place when I was 19. She lived 2 hours away. I went to take a shower one night, and I apparently forgot to lock the door. As I opened the curtains, her mother opened the bathroom door. I stood there for a second in shock, grabbed a towel I always hang over the curtain rod, then covered my nether region. She stood in the doorway staring at me for a good 10 seconds, looking me up and down. She finally blinks her eyes and quickly exits. I dry off and go into my girlfriend's room and tell her what happened, and she gets mad at me. The next morning, my girlfriend gets up before me and her mom comes into the room. I'm awake, but just laying there in bed. She asks my girlfriend if I told her what happened the night before, and she says yes. Her mom says, "He's got a nice body. Don't lose that one." Her mom exits the room, and my girlfriend is now ticked at me again. She was an unreasonably jealous person. Too long didn't read. My ex's mom, girlfriend at the time, walks in on me naked after a shower and compliments my manliness to my ex. Ex gets mad at me. I was chasing my girlfriend's dog out of the room after the intimate times were over. I was naked. I didn't hear her mom come home, and she came up the stairs while I was chasing the dog naked down the hallway. She shouted, "Hey!" and I yelped and leaped back into the room, jumped in the laundry bin in the closet, and shut the door. So much embarrassment. Story 9. When I was little, like 9 or 10 years old, I went over to my friend's house to chill and work on our science project. At about 5, just before the sun started to go down, my friend's dad called him and he told me, "1 second, I'll be right back." Jump forward 20 minutes and my friend is still gone. I go look for him and his whole family is in the kitchen eating dinner. His dad asks me, "Oh, hey, Big Juicy, do you know your way home?" I had no idea how to respond, so I just grabbed my backpack and walked the 2 miles back home. It doesn't seem too bad to me now that I walk a few miles every day, but to chubby 10-year-old me, it was absolutely torturous. I was so confused at the time as to what to do, but looking back, the whole situation was extremely awkward for everyone involved, and frankly, quite rude. They never offered me a ride home, some dinner or anything. They just sorta ignored me and then told me to get the hell out. Wow, you telling this story reminded me that the same thing happened to me. I was at a friend's house. He was asked to come downstairs. After a long enough time period, I got curious and wandered downstairs to his family eating dinner. I just silently stepped outside and walked home. That is absolutely rude. No communication about dinner time? Not even beforehand? I'm sure it made these guests feel like they weren't worth being talked to about anything. What if these people had waited until they finished dinner? Would they have gone back to their work or activities? Or would they have just started getting ready for bed and leaving this person wondering what's happening? Story 10. When I was about 10 years old, I was kicked out of Cub Scouts. I grew up in a Midwestern suburb full of good church folk. The den mother was the wife of a cop and my best friend's mother. Like all other boys in the 4th grade, I joined Cub Scouts. For the first 6 months or so, I did pretty well. I earned a couple merit badges, built a soapbox derby car, and generally had fun with friends. I was a rambunctious kid, but so were all the other 10-year-olds. On one occasion, we were asked to talk about what it was our parents did for a living. We all sat in a circle, and when it was my turn, I said my dad was a salesman and that my mom worked for the state. The den mother then asked me why my mom worked and who took care of me. I said my parents were divorced and that after school I went to a babysitter's house across the street from the school. The next day, my friend told me that his mom wouldn't let him play with me anymore because my parents were divorced and I would be a bad influence on him. He also told me I'd been kicked out of the Scouts because there was no man in the house to oversee my progress. My mom was working her butt off, and I didn't want her to lose her cool over this and embarrass me by going over there and raising hell, though that's exactly what I should have done. Eventually, I moved in with my dad and we went to a different school. But every now and then, I think, what a shrew, and how much I'd like to confront her about it now. Story 11. I was talking to a friend of mine about my upcoming formal. I think it's a prom in America. She said that she couldn't wait to go and that she had just bought the most beautiful dress. I was a bit confused because I didn't know she was going and asked her who was bringing her. She said John was. Mutual friend, not his real name. Now this is where it gets awkward because I knew John had actually asked another girl we knew. I saw him ask. So I say to her, "Are you sure? I thought he was bringing X." She looks at me with a confused expression and gets out her phone to text John. We stand in awkward silence for what seems like an eternity until finally John replies, but to my phone, asking me to tell her she isn't going. I show her the text and she just says, "Oh," then looks at me and says, "I have to get back to my mom," and practically runs away holding back tears. As it turns out, John asked our friend, then decided he didn't want to bring her anymore, and just asked X instead without ever telling her. I have never felt so awkward than when I was having that conversation, and have never been so furious at someone as I was at John. This happened to me in high school, but the friend of the douche counteroffered to take me. Story 12. Last year, I went to visit a friend Shirley after her brother had perished. Her brother committed self-termination by running the car in the garage. When I got there, there was another girl at the house. I don't remember her name, but let's call her Lisa, who was eating a plate of food that Shirley's mom had cooked. Before I got to the house, apparently Lisa had driven Shirley's dad somewhere down the street because Shirley's family wasn't using the car that terminated their son. I don't know the exact details. Anyway, before Lisa leaves, she asks Shirley if she can have gas money for driving Shirley's dad down the road. It was literally a mile or two that she drove him, so I thought it was a bit stingy of her. So Shirley calls her dad into the room and says, "Lisa would like gas money for driving you today." And her dad said, "Okay, and I would like food money for the food you ate in my house." It was really awkward, but I was proud of her dad. The mourning process is such a fragile time, and even the smallest actions can be downright awful. I remember when my uncle self-unalived himself and I had a few finals left to take for school, and almost punched a teacher in the face when they started complaining to me about how to plan my vacations ahead of time rather than at the last minute. That teacher should have been punched, and it should have been filmed, and it should have been posted online. Then you go to the principal. Ask them to defend the teacher. Relish the principal's answer. It's indefensible, and they know it. Story 13. So back when we were 17 or 18, my boyfriend and I were in his room one day, just watching movies and chilling. His mom walks in and asks to talk to him. They both go out into the living room, and she proceeds to rant at him about how it's not normal for us to spend so much time together and how she didn't like that we had been in his room all day. Meanwhile, I'm alone in his room and can clearly hear the whole conversation. I gather my nerves and all my stuff, walk out to the room, and say, "Matt, I'm going home. Would you like to come over to my house?" The mom interrupts with, "We're actually having a conversation here." So I just say goodbye and walk out the door. His sister, who suspected a conflict had been initiated by me, then chases me out the door screaming, "You freaking shrew! You ruined my family!" I was pretty shocked by this and didn't respond and just got in my car and drove home. A few minutes later, my boyfriend shows up to apologize for his family. A few minutes after that, There's another knock on the door, and his mom had followed us to my house and asks him to talk to him outside. He told her to go home. This all happened a few months before we moved away to university, so I just didn't go to their house again. We're now in our 20s and still live together. His family is still crazy, and he agrees. Luckily, we now live 5 hours from them. Story 14. My most awkward moment. I had been friends with this guy for 9 years. We were both sophomores in college, and he was home for Christmas break, staying with his parents. We discovered that we had feelings for each other, but decided we didn't want to date long distance. But while he was home, we wanted to spend time together. We were with a group of friends, but decided to go back to his house, just the two of us. He had asked his parents earlier in the day if he could have friends over. Well, his parents already disliked me. My brother had dated my friend's sister and broke her heart. Whoops! So I show up at their house with them expecting a group of people, and it's already awkward. Then my friend and I spend a couple of hours in his basement making out. By this time, it was pretty late, around 1:30 a.m. He went upstairs to get his keys to drive me home, and when he came back downstairs, his eyes were really wide, and he said, "I'm so sorry." Apparently, his mother was still awake and refused to let him drive me home that late. So she decides it would be better if she drove me home. It was a 20-minute drive, and the car was completely silent. Story 15. My grandparents, both in their late 80s, invited me to come down to Florida for spring break one year, and they said I could bring a friend. I was thrilled, and so was my friend Em. She and I booked our tickets and were really excited for our trip. About a week beforehand, Graham called me to talk logistics. What kind of food should they have for us? What kind of things would we like to do? Would we be wanting to share a bed? She kind of slipped that last one in there, and I, shocked, told her that Em and I are not gay. I'm pretty sure she didn't believe me, because every morning at breakfast while we were there, she told us about how there were several gays at her church, and they were wonderful, and the whole congregation was very open. It was the cutest thing ever, but so awkward, especially when my World War II vet grandpa, strong and silent, chimed in his acceptance. Too long didn't read? My grandparents are extremely supportive of my non-existent gay relationship. After so many posts about awkwardness coming from relations not accepting choices of significant others, this over-acceptance is really refreshing. I can sort of see where the grandparents are coming from. They grew up in times where people had to be very protective and denying of their gayness. I'm sure they thought they were doing all they could to help them. Like they were saying, "It's okay. We don't mind. We accept you. You don't have to be afraid of speaking up." Story 16. I dated a girl named Chrissy for a year back in college. Her parents were divorced and she lived with her mother and never spoke fondly of her dad. I got the impression that he had cheated and that's what led to the split. About 9 months in, I finally meet Chrissy's dad while helping her twin sister move. I had dark emo-y hair, a lip ring, visible tattoos, and it was obvious that he didn't like me right off the bat. He acted like a dong to me the entire day, enough to where Chrissy and him got into a huge fight over dinner over it, prompting us to leave midway through. He called her 10 minutes later and threatened to cut her off if she didn't break it off with me immediately. 8 years later, he's a client of mine, and we get along incredibly well. He has no idea I'm the same guy who dated Chrissy. Nothing in my posting history is going to help anyone potentially let him know for me, so we're good. Not a paid spicy worker. Or a female. I think you should tell him that was you. You'd both get a great laugh out of it. Story 17. I was the only guy in a class of 25 students for Psychology of Women. That day's topic was domestic abuse, and the prof wanted to set the tone by asking everyone to close their eyes and engage in a visualization exercise. She wants us to think in great detail about how the typical domestic abuse incident plays out. She starts asking questions, and various students provide answers. Who is the victim? A woman. Who is the aggressor? A man. Why is he abusing her? He came home from work and dinner was cold, and so on. It's established through this exercise that the imaginary couple are poor, the man drinks, and they live in a trailer home. Then she asks, what did he do to her? And someone says, he pushed her down the stairs. The girl next to me whispers, in a way that no one hears, there aren't stairs in a trailer home, which causes me to do a loud sputter laugh in a way which everyone hears. I spend the next hour and a half in a room full of 26 women who think I think beating women is hilarious. C+ for the class. Too long didn't read? Classmates' snarky comment in a Psych of Women class caused the all-female class to think I was amused by violence against women. The girl who made the comment knew what's up.
Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 18. I feel so bad for all of you guys who had to date people with awful fathers. My girlfriend's father gets along with absolutely no one. My girlfriend, her sister, her mother's side of the family, they're always at each other's throats. Even a huge amount of his own side of the family aren't on the best terms with him. For whatever reason, though, he and I get along great. He's taken me out to his shooting range, shown me his drum room, and even let me make a racket on those sons of shrews. Not many people are allowed in there. We talk about typical guy stuff, cars, computers, sports, video games, etc. The kicker to all of this is that my girlfriend's family, for the most part, are super conservative Caucasians. I know for a fact that her father can be quite xenophobic towards most ethnicities. And here I am, a Hispanic with no real education, currently without a job, just barely skating by in life, and he willingly accepts me as part of his family. It's definitely something else, and I don't take it for granted. You guys and gals deserve better. What in the Gran Torino is this situation? Why him? Maybe there's some incident we don't know about where the father saw just how truly this person cares for his daughter. Maybe he just decided he's had enough of other people. Very weird. But lucky for this guy. Story 19. I was invited by my son's father to pick him up at a horseback riding lesson after a weekend visit. He told me what time, gave me directions, etc. I went at the appointed time and said hello to my son as he was getting ready for the lesson. Then I sat down. After the lesson, my son wanted to show me around, meet the horse, etc., and we wind up in an observatory area perched above the arena. There are couches and several other observers up there, and we encounter my ex's girlfriend's, the woman he'd left me for, daughter, around my son's age, 6 or so. We're chit-chatting about horses, the three of us, when my ex-girlfriend comes storming into the observatory to scream at me to leave. Apparently, my ex had neglected to mention I'd be there. At the top of her lungs, in front of everyone, including her increasingly upset daughter, she says, I pay for these lessons. I schedule these lessons. And if you want to come to these lessons, you need to clear it with me. At this point, my son's upset at the yelling. Her daughter's crying. My ex looks as if he'd like to melt into the floor. And I say to her, I'm so sorry X didn't realize he needed your permission to invite me to a public place. I'm sure he'll never do it again. And my son and I walk out. Story 20. A friend of a friend was throwing a toga party across town, and I wanted to go. All of my friends were invited, but unbeknownst to me, I'd ticked off the host at a previous party over a year before, and he had given specific instructions that I was not invited. I'm pretty sure it's because I got super drunk and New Year's kissed a girl he had been hitting on. In the afternoon before the party, I met up with some of the friends who were going to go, intending on carpooling with them. Brought my toga and everything. When it was time to leave the bar for the party, we all went out and got in their car and sat there for like 30 minutes talking. My friends kept saying things like, well, we're off to the party, with the intention of hinting at me to get out of the car, but I didn't realize it. Finally, one friend said, dude, you weren't invited, so you have to get out before we go. So, everyone's invited. Other friend is bringing a bunch of people host's name doesn't know. It'll be fine. No, dude, you don't understand. Host's name specifically said not to invite you. Oh, he specifically said that? What the hell? Well, have fun, I guess. That was probably the worst rejection I've ever had just because of the buildup of expecting to go for a week and then having to go home by myself for the evening. Story 21. While this isn't the most awkward moment I've had, it is the most awkward relationship-based one. My husband and I paid for our own wedding. We got married at Disney with very few people invited since we could only afford the small wedding. That suited us both fine, as neither of us are very close to our extended families. My husband's family decided to rent a house and throw us a party a couple of days after the wedding, which is a very nice gesture. The not-so-nice part was when they explicitly stated that my family was not invited. I just assumed they were and made mention of it, which was when I was shown the error of my ways. Needless to say, I didn't want to go. I'm a bit asocial to start with, and rejecting my family was a pretty big no-no. I'm sure some people will understand why they chose not to invite my family, but when you get right down to it, it was just plain rude. I had to beg my brother to go with me, as I wasn't comfortable walking into that without some sort of support. My husband loves me and supports me, but it's not fair for me to put him between his family and myself. Furthermore, I was really sick, which made it so much worse. Sounds like there was some tension between the family beforehand already. What caused this stipulation of not inviting her family to this party? Did they think this was natural? Did they think the girl's family would have a party where they weren't invited? I have a feeling a lot of the holidays this couple are going to be celebrating are also going to be very small, hardly any family invited type of affairs. Story 22. 2 nights ago, I was sitting in the emergency room with my mother in the bed. She had fallen and hit her head during one of her routine diazepam, Valium, Tylenol, and wine binges. Her eyes were entirely black, and she was completely unresponsive, so I called 911. After dealing with the ambulance driving into the wrong driveway and waking up the entire neighborhood, we got her into the ambulance quickly. When we arrived at the hospital, the nurses doing intake were continuously whispering to each other and giving me nasty looks. Like the state my mother was in was somehow my fault. After sitting with her for 3 hours and her ripping the IV out of her arm 3 times, the only words she said for the 3 hours before she passed out were a slurred, repeated, "I hate you." Her bed in the emergency ward happened to be right next to the nurses' station, and I could hear them talking about her/me the entire time I was there. By the time I went home, all I could read in their eyes was a kind of pity. I figure this will get buried, but all of it will probably stick with me forever. Story 23. I went to my neighbor's house on the 4th of July with a big box of fireworks I had bought in Pennsylvania. We were drinking in his house for a bit before his mom showed up with his grandmother. They were outside on the porch, and I was on the other side of the glass sliding door preparing the fireworks to bring outside and downing a beer. I finished my beer and grabbed the box to go outside and stepped directly into the screen door, which I hadn't realized was still closed. I go completely through it and tear the door off the hinges, all the while screaming obscenities in front of his mother and grandmother. They don't let me drink at their house anymore. I can picture this so perfectly because my friend did something similar. My family had my friend's family over for dinner. All of us kids were inside, but the parents were outside. My mom called us because the food was ready, and my friend got overly excited and ran outside, taking the screen door down with her. She mutilated it, and she weighs about 115 pounds. We never let her forget it. Story 24. When I was 14, I had a boyfriend called George. Being 14, all we ever did was make out and watch movies together. And his dad was cool enough that sometimes we would have some of George's friends over too. One day, George and I were chilling out with our mutual friend Steven, watching awful TV and whatnot, when his dad walks in and says, "You guys just watching telly then?" "Well, George, I think I'm going to call old Mary." We're British, yes. So about 10 minutes passes, and someone comes to the door, and they go upstairs. George then turns around and says casually, "Old Mary's a paid spicy partner, by the way." The look on our faces must have been rather special. I think we sat through about 5 minutes of the dodgiest sounding smashing before making excuses to leave. What a messed up father-son relationship. Old Mary. I wonder if his father and him shared Old Mary. Story 15. Our school marching band takes a trip to Orlando, Florida every 4 years, and I went as a sophomore. The entire trip, a girl in my section that I had been friends with for a long time began flirting with me, holding my hand and whatnot. After the week was over, basically everyone knew there was a thing between us. Now we're sitting by each other on the way home on the bus, nearly back to our hometown, napping under a blanket, when she slowly undoes my belt and reaches inside my pants. It is 3 in the afternoon, broad daylight. We both continue to pretend to be sleeping. Then I hear the girl in the seat directly in front of us say, "Look, is she?" followed by dead silence in the back of the bus. She slowly withdraws her hand from my shorts, leaving me to refasten my own belt whilst pretending to be unconscious. Too long didn't read? I received unsatisfactory manual spicy time in full view of 15 to 16 people in the back of a bus. What the hell? You never out someone getting or giving a handy in the back of the band bus. That's what the back of the band bus is for. Story 26. A friend wanted me to find a date for a formal our fraternity was having. I asked a few girls, and they had other things to do. So I called a girl that I usually danced with at a few dances. She picks up the phone, I reply who I am, and ask if she wants to go to the winter formal that was coming up. I overhear her say to her roommate, "It's that stupid boy who always asks me to dance." She agreed. Fast forward a few months later, and I got introduced to her roommate. I knew who she was. As soon as I can, I tell her, "I was the stupid boy who kept asking your roommate to dance." Her eyes got really big, and she said, "You heard that?" I had a good laugh about it. Story 27. Was told to move my vehicle from girlfriend's driveway because it's dirty. I live on a gravel road, and the mom didn't want neighbors to see it, apparently. She also freaked out when I wore khaki shorts to their country club for dinner. I was never informed of a dress code. She wanted me to pretend to be a foreign exchange student. It didn't help that I met their daughter through mowing their lawn the previous summers. Apparently, she felt that the help was not worthy of her daughter. I hate the richest people who think like that. It's stupid and pointless, and all it proves is that you're rich and stupid. Story 28. We had a housewarming party, and my fiancé and I invited friends over. One friend, who is a lesbian and had the hots for my fiancé, got drunk and proceeded to tell me how worthless I am, and I'm too fat and ugly for my fiancé in front of everybody. Party ended and didn't see her for a year. My fiancé blew the comment off, but I didn't. I was hurt by it. So I started working out, went from 235 pounds to 162 pounds, and then saw the lesbian again. Needless to say, the look on her face was priceless. Yes, it was awkward and she was a shrew, but I do give her a silent thanks for getting me to give a care about my physical appearance. And spicy time is better now, too. Story 29. I went to a predominantly white high school, and by the time I was in 12th grade, there were only 5 black students in my year. One day, my principal and a couple of teachers approached me and asked if I could act as translator/tutor for a new student who's from the same place I am. Forward a couple of days, and I'm called into the office to meet the student. It turns out the girl is from West Africa. I'm East African, and we have nothing in common minus us being from the same continent. The principal sits at his desk beaming, waiting for us to speak. We could tell right away we weren't from the same place. I had to awkwardly explain how we're not from the same country and that Africans did not have a common language. Story 30. For a project in school, we had to ask each other about why we chose the subject of our essay. Mine was to do with music, and the girl I was partnered with asked why. I replied with, "I just really love music." I then asked her what her project was about. She said it was about domestic violence. Jokingly, looking back, it was jokingly because it was such an unusual topic, I asked, "Oh, guess you really love domestic violence then?" "No, it's because of my mom." Awkward silence followed by desperate apologies. I'm going to hell. Story 31. I had a similar situation, except I wasn't thrown out of the car. I was thrown out of their house 8 miles from my own. I was 15 and had been dropped off there. Her dad was drunk and got all crazy and threw me out, then beat the hell out of her. Her mom had him arrested, and 2 days later, when he got out of jail, she dumped me. I had to walk the entire way because cell phones weren't considered necessities to the common folk yet. And hitchhiking was useless in the middle of the day with no traffic and nothing around but corn and bean fields. Story 32. That's pretty freaking awkward. Yours was unprovoked. Mine, not so much. When I was 16, I was at my girlfriend's house watching movies, which meant making out and such. We had dinner with her parents, and she told them we were in the middle of the flick and could we finish it before they drove me home. They agreed, and we went back in. Things escalated, and she gave me oral spicy time, and her dad walked in as she was in the middle of it. He wanted me to walk home, which I wanted to do, but she flipped out and made him drive me home, which was in the next town over, so it was like 15 minutes of horrible, horrible silence. Story 33. After having my second child, I went to the craft store to buy art supplies. As I lifted my youngest child into the cart at the front of the store, in clear view of the street and the cash register with waiting customers, my 3 sizes too big pants fell to the floor, revealing my granny panties. My 2-year-old son let out a howl and pointed at me. I quickly collected him and ran to hide at the back of the store. After a while, I made a mad dash, paid for my stuff, and got the heck out of there. No gentleman would make light of a lady in distress. Story 34. Nice how some people are condemning the girlfriend, saying she should have got out with you or she's a shrew. My girlfriend stuck up for me, and her father hit her. I feel sorry for her more than you, if I'm honest, as you can wash your hands of the whole thing. She sounds like she had a horrible childhood. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me she's stuck with Dad. 22 years of that, plus it would mean a lot less contact with the rest of her family. It's a really hard decision to make, especially when your love life is not your only priority. Can't fault her for it. Story 35. I went to my friend's house once, and my friend and her mom got in a huge fight. I ended up just petting their dog in the corner, staring. Oh my God, I remember my friend doing that in high school. We went over to his house during a spare, and his mother called him out on going on the computer late at night. They had a scream fight. He punched a wall, and I sat on their couch wondering if I should just dive out the window or wait for them to finish. Story 36. Oh dear, I can't imagine being under such heavy influence from my parents as to leave a partner a couple of years just because someone demands it. Wait. Actually, I can relate a little. My girlfriend's parents stopped supporting her college education expenses. It's free, but living in a city costs financially as soon as she moved in with me. They would if we married. We barely scraped by for 2 months, but now we're able to support ourselves. Story 37. In high school, I was 15, dating a 16-year-old girl. Her dad caught us doing the deed. I hightailed it out the back door. 2 weeks later, my parents made me take her to the homecoming dance that we had agreed to pre-incident. So I had to go to her house to pick her up. I sat there in her parents' living room for 45 minutes waiting for her to finish getting ready, while her parents sat across the room from me just staring. Her father's face was literally purple. Story 38. My brother and his lady friend came inside, and I asked him where his girlfriend was, because her bras were still in the laundry room. He informed me that they had broken up a month before, and that this lady was his new girlfriend. I had already invited his ex over to watch movies with me, and when she arrived, everyone stood there in awkward silence for about a full minute. Everyone left pretty quickly. I am a female, and didn't know they'd broken up. Story 39. Way back in high school, my then-boyfriend was over visiting at my house. I decided to be nice and heat up some leftovers for him from the fridge. Right as I set down the plate, my dad walks in and says, "That is our food," and takes the plate away from him and sits down to eat it at the opposite end of the table. I just stood there in painfully awkward silence until my dad finished and left. What the frick is wrong with your dad? Story 40. In defense of the girlfriend, seeing how bizarre the dad acted in that situation, going as far as to hit his daughter, I doubt this is the first time something like this happened. I'm guessing she could have suffered years of physical and/or mental abuse from him, making her feel like she has no choice but to do what he says. So honestly, I don't think she's crazy for breaking up with you. Story 41. I once went to my girlfriend's for Christmas in high school because my parents went on vacation. During dinner, her sister decides to announce she's pregnant. She's a 20-year-old single college student. Who's the dad? My 27-year-old cousin. They met at one of our family functions. Story 42. I was with a friend of mine and her sister in their truck, and for whatever reason, we were talking about Harry Potter characters. I said, "What's the name of the werewolf prof? Professor Lupus?" I was wrong. It's Lupin. Lupus is the disease that unalived their mother. Story 43. The father hit her, and then she broke up with you? Stay the frick away from that family. They're crazy. I so agree, and count yourself lucky finding this out now rather than later. Story 44. 15 seconds is a long time to be silently awkward in a car full of hostility. I don't think I would have been able to contain myself. I would have just started laughing at her father. Story 45. My most awkward moment? I'm a cam girl, and my dad walked in on me when I was doing a cam show. Story 46. Why didn't he want her to date you? There must be a reason, even if it's a stupid one.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.